4 months ago, a codex dropped that has been shaking up the meta since it landed, and that would be my boys, your boys probably, the Grey Knights. Heard a lot of griping lately about the lists and how they're uninteresting and they're boring. They're all Dreadknights and Interceptors. And why is that? So what I want to do is talk about exactly that. What is the problem with Grey Knights? So generally, when you're thinking about the Grey Knights and you're looking at our codex, you crack that open and you're trying to find the most efficient, because let's be honest, when it comes to competitive Warhammer, competitive anything, you're going to try to find the most efficient way to win. Dreadknights and Interceptors are clearly, absolutely 100% the best, most efficient datasheets in our codex. And if you look at the standings and the meta and what is a good list right now and what is not, you can see that aside from people like Stuart Traynor who are bringing power armor to RTTs and doing fairly well, you'll see that there are a lot of Dreadknight and Interceptor builds out there with variations about who's bringing what other HQs and things like that. Sometimes they bring the Mortal Wounds Libby, or they'll bring Kaldor Drago, but for the most part you see Swordbearers and then some other Brotherhood, and they pack them both full of Interceptors and Dreadknights for a total of 4 to 6 Dreadknights and anywhere from 20 to 30 Interceptors. Now why is that? If you take a look at the codex itself and you crack open to all of the data sheets, the first thing you'll actually notice is, other than Space Marine vehicles and characters, there are really 8 unique data sheets in this entire codex. 8. And that's including Grandmasters in Nemesis Dreadknights and Dreadknights being 2 different data sheets. It's not as deep as a Space Marine Codex, it's not as deep as the Drakari Codex, it's not as deep as the AdMech Codex when it comes to the amount of units available. From a game design standpoint, you're already on the back foot there, where you have to decide how can you make 8 unique data sheets interesting and viable to play. Here are the things that I think we can expect. I think we can expect that Games Workshop will very quickly make it so that Dreadknights are all counted as the same datasheet. No more 6 Dreadknight lists, no more 5 Dreadknight lists, which I'm guilty of running. Instead, Grandmasters and normal Dreadknights will count as one data sheet when it comes to the rule of 3. Now, unfortunately, this actually makes our other problem worse, where instead of having 8 unique data sheets, we now have 7. However, there are other things I think that could be done to bring that in line and make more compelling and interesting army lists. The second thing is, for Dreadknights in particular, I would be surprised to see that they not go up in points in some way. Be that the weapon options, the actual base chassis, I don't know, but I'm definitely suspecting that those 2 things will happen. This next conversation is not going to surprise any of you. I want to talk about Terminators, but I think it's important to point out before we get started, the Grey Knights only have access to 2 different troop types. That's it. First is, of course, the Strike Squad at 22 points per model. Second is our Terminator Squad at 42 points per model. What are you getting for that 20-point premium? You're getting access to an extra wound and a 5-up invul. If you compare our Terminators to other Terminators that are available to pretty much every other chapter, you see that a Terminator starts at 33 points, and you still get all of the access to those things, except you don't get Psychic Shenanigans, and you do not get our Nemesis Force Weapon. I am having trouble seeing where those 2 abilities make our Brotherhood Terminators worth 9 points more than another Terminator, when they don't have access to the thing that is supposed to make Terminators niche compared to Strike Marines. And that is, Terminators are supposed to be able to survive. And right now, they cannot. In a meta full of such high AP weapons and D3+3 damage, they don't survive. You're better off sending a 22-point Strike Marine model to go get one-shot by a Dark Lance than you are a 42-point model to go get one shot by a Dark Lance. Something needs to be done to either increase their survivability, like maybe give 4-ups across the board for all of our Terminators, or the cost needs to be dropped significantly by 4 to 5 points per model, or they will not see competitive play. Another thing I want to bitch and moan about is another one of our Terminator options, which is, of course, bing, 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 our boys, the Paladins. They were such clutch, amazing units in 8th, and now in 9th, we don't really see them run hardly at all. And a lot of that has to do with their price. I think that's a knee-jerk reaction, however. What I think is they just don't bring enough for the price. If, for instance, we compare them with Deathwing Knights from Dark Angels, Deathwing Knights bring OBSEC, Paladins do not. They bring permanent transhuman at all times, Paladins do not. You already see that they have a leg up over our guys. They can also take Storm Shields, Paladins cannot. These guys are walking up the board with a 1-up, 4-up, and they have permanently transhumans. You can only ever wound them on 4. Now, if you contrast that with our Paladins, we have more attacks, quite a few more, twice as many actually, and we have a better melee weapon in general. We don't have a Storm Shield. We have a worse invul because of it, and we have psychic shenanigans. So how do we fix this? Now, I'm not saying that we just give Paladins the Deathwing Terminator treatment, and we give them Storm Shields, and we give them permanent transhuman. That's not an interesting choice. What I'm saying is we compare it to other units that have the same role on the battlefield as the Paladins do, like, say, Death Shroud Terminators from Death Guard, where they have the bodyguard rule. So what if they heroically intervene like a character? Or what if they went to 4-up invul? Something that would make those extra points comparable, especially if Terminators did come down 5 points, like I was just saying, and these guys stayed the same price. How do you make Paladins worth that extra cost? Right now, they get to pick their powers, which is super cool. It's very neat. It's an interesting choice, but they can still only cast 1 without spending CP. So, again, how do we make these guys interesting? Yes, you could just reduce their cost by 5 points as well, but you could also make the Honored Knight keyword do something. Right now, the Honored Knight keyword doesn't do anything. I think in the future, we're supposed to get an army of renown that is going to be centered around this keyword. But right now, all it really does is it limits us. Because if you take an Honored Knight, they're not able to take any of the Brotherhood powers. They're not able to get any rerolls from their Brotherhood Grandmasters or their Brotherhood Brother Captains. They're just kind of sitting there on their own. Unless you bring Kaldor Drago along, who can buff everybody, they don't get any rerolls at all. And I think that we could see something happen with the Honored Knight keyword. And I'm at a loss right now for what that might be. But that's not really going to fix it, is it? If we bring down the price of Paladins and Terminators, or we bring down Terminators and give Paladins something else, that's not going to fix the rest of the army, especially if Dreadknights become less efficient. Because again, if you ruin the efficiency of the Dreadknights in the current meta, Grey Knights will drop and drop and drop, and they won't be competitive anymore. And the idea is not to make them uncompetitive, it is simply to give them more effective and interesting choices. So we could do something like buff our Purgation Squads. What's the biggest culprit that made them not good between 8th and 9th? It was the nerf to this guy, Astral Aim. Am I saying we should bring back old Astral Aim? No, I think that out of line of sight shooting is pretty bad for the game as a whole, but we could buff Astral Aim. We could do something like you reroll 1s to wound or 1s to hit, floating 6s to hit, more AP, some combination of those things. Ignoring cover is very good, but a heavy weapon squad that gets to reroll 1 hit? Squad with psi cannons, they're firing 12 times. He gets to reroll 1? Not that great. It's not terrible, but it's not great. If you gave them ways that they could interact and do things on their own, so they could come out of deep strike, they get the +1 to hit to ignore movement, or maybe they could ignore movement entirely, like the old Sisters Retributors. That brings us to Strike Marines and Interceptors. So I don't want to see Interceptors changed at all. I think they're fantastic right now, I think that their movement and their firepower and their ability to be just obnoxious and everywhere is great. I think that they feel very Grey Knight. They were one of my favorite units in the 8th book, and I'm glad to see that they're doing well now. Likewise, our Strike Marines are priced very well. They're super hot right now. They are 22 points. They get to be effectively charging Blade Guard, re-rolling wounds with mastercrafted weapons and psychic shenanigans, like re-rolling all wounds in combat. I mean, they're just great. I'm surprised, and I will be surprised if they do not see a price hike in the future. Though hopefully it isn't by more than a point or two. The other thing is, I just think that the Brotherhoods were kind of a hit and a miss. Not to say that I don't mind the extra added choice of picking between them, but when you compare it to factions like Orcs with their clan cultures and Drukhari with their cabals and their witch cults, you really see that we don't get a lot of the same types of bonuses that those armies get. If you look at Cabal of the Black Heart here, one of the most popular up until recently, Cabal of the Black Heart was very popular, and a lot of it was because they got all of these passive buffs by taking this detachment type. They get to advance and charge on turn 2, then even if you take them in a real space raid, you still get that bonus. And then you can also combine these with some really gnarly combinations from the other cabals and the other witch cults. Another thing that we're seeing is in other cabals, we're seeing Artists of Flesh. We're still seeing Dark Technomancers. We had a Brotherhood where we could take -1 to damage for our whole, for every non-vehicle unit in that detachment. You could really see how we might bring more non-vehicles, non-Dreadknights. Not saying we should just copy what's in the Drukhari book. My point is, there are buffs that could have happened from these Brotherhoods that did not. So we don't get a relic from every Brotherhood, but we do get a psychical power, and some of them are good and some of them are not. We don't get any of those passive buffs. So I was talking to Canon Biggs in one of my latest interviews, link in the description down below, and we got on a tangent about this, and he got me really thinking. The Brotherhoods just don't really change the way that you play, other than the fact that maybe you take Blades of Victory because you like to reroll charges with a psychical power, and you like a 6-inch pregame move for your Warlord and 1 core unit. Like, that's fun. That's not bad. Those could still exist in the Blade of Victory, but it's definitely not something like from turn 2 you get to advance and charge for the rest of the game. It's not, you know, fall back and shoot. It's not fall back and charge. One of the things that I brought up in that conversation with Canon is like, what if Sword Bearers gave a passive bonus for all Rhinos and all Land Raiders, and maybe even just Land Raiders, get us assault ramps like they used to have additions ago. Suddenly you might see that Sword Bearers might want to bring Terminators so they can pack them into Land Raiders, shove them up the board really fast, get out and charge in the same exact turn. You might see cool lists being built by people who are taking Land Raiders, where before you don't see them. They don't go on a competitive table because they are not worth 265 base points. I'm not saying everybody should get advance and charge, because everybody wants that, but there are definitely game design decisions that I think were missed when it came to designing Brotherhoods. It's not just data sheets, it's also how the meta is shaping up right now. And right now, the fact that the Dreadknights can pump out so much damn shooting so reliably is just very effective. And so there are other armies that are coming out here in January. We know for a fact we're going to see the new Custodes book, and we know for a fact that we're going to see the new Genestealer Cult book. And then because Warhammer community has started previewing so many of the new Tau rules and data sheets, I think we're going to see Tau in January as well. All of those codexes are going to shake up the meta. Genestealer cults hide. They can't be shot. Some of them can't be shot at all unless you're inside of 12 inches. Custos are tough as shit. They're hard to kill. Tau are gonna have better shooting than Dreadknights. It just is the fact. That's their whole shtick, is shooting. So the fact that you think that you can build a Grey Knight list that's gonna survive the Tau meta when Riptides are gonna be back killing it at range, you just don't see that that's gonna be a thing. So in conclusion, I think there are two things that are going to really shake up the meta and two things that we can do about it. The first thing that's going to shake up the meta is all the upcoming codexes. We've got Tau, got Custodes, and we have Genestealer cults. I definitely think Tau are going to go ahead and shoot holes, quite literally, in the current Dreadknight meta. The second thing are the changes that I believe that Games Workshop is probably going to make to the game as a whole, and especially with Grey Knights. That is, changing how many Dreadknights we can bring, and maybe increasing the cost of Interceptors and Strike Squads by a couple of points. And I think that what we can do to balance out the game is we can have more options available for our Brotherhoods that include passive buffs that change the way that the army is played, and I believe that a couple of balanced changes to the datasheets, particularly to Terminators and Paladins and Purgation Squads, could really see us do more and see more variation in list building in the competitive scene. I'm a Grey Knights player. They're who got me into this game in the first place. I do not want to see them dropped out of the competitive field entirely. I want to see changes made that are healthy to the game as a whole, that help people play the game that they want to play without making them completely worthless. Love my Grey Knights. Well, thank you for listening to my spiel. I'm just some guy on the internet who loves Grey Knights, and I hate to see them poo-pooed on. I would love to see more interesting and varied lists, just like all of you out there do, I'm sure. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and comment and subscribe and all of that annoying stuff that I know that most of you are already turning off. And, of course, don't forget to call your mother.